Welcome to Global Eye. Not just what you need to know, but what you want to know. Oh boy, did I miss saying that. I'm Ellie Hockenberg, and together we're going to take a wider and deeper look into the world we live in, and this is what we have on tonight's show. Mad about the bomb. We convened a summit, a literal blast from the past. What's with the latest nuclear craze? Tanzania's Iron Lady, President Hassan, secures another term, beating mostly herself and claims of an opposition crackdown. We break it all down. Winter's coming, and that's no wonderland. Cancer, diabetes, depression, the dark side of changing time. Why aren't we ditching daylight saving? And make America dance again? What's the real deal with the Trump White House ballroom? So before we get to all of this and so much more, we are eyeing the globe's biggest stories. If you don't act, I will. This is essentially what U.S. President Donald Trump is telling the Nigerian government, doubling down on his role as global protector of religion, or freedom of religion, more accurately, warning of a Christian genocide.
If the Nigerian government continues to allow the killing of Christians, the USA will immediately stop all aid and assistance to Nigeria, and may very well go into that now disgraced country, guns a-blazing, to completely wipe out the Islamic terrorists who are committing these horrible atrocities.
Nigeria's population of more than 230 million is more or less evenly split between Muslims and Christians. Violence in the country has grown amid near daily attacks by armed groups and bandits, especially in the northern part of the country. But, and this is a peculiar yet important but, the patterns of violence are all over. As in, yes, Christians have been targeted, as have other religious groups, as have people of different ethnic affiliation, or by how they make their living, or what sports team they favor, or ice cream flavor. You get the point. So while Trump's global campaign against religious violence is obviously a good thing, not all violence is religion-driven. Not all divides are. Makes things a bit more complicated, I know. Well, speaking of the different urges or motivations of violence, 2 men have been arrested, one of them already released without charges, in suspicion to the shocking mass stabbing attack in a London-bound train, likely not terror-related.
I was literally just listening to Audible on my phone, and then I had guys suddenly run past going, run, run. There's a guy stabbing literally everyone, everything. There was a few of us kind of looking at each other like thinking, was it a joke, like it's Halloween, I'd be pranking. And then I look at my hand and it's covered in blood. And then I look at the chair and there's blood all over the chair.
The early Saturday evening attack on the railway service from Doncaster, South Yorkshire to London's King's Cross station was at first thought to be a Halloween prank of sorts. Passengers hiding in restrooms at some point, running around frantically, as at least one person armed with a knife began stabbing people until armed police boarded the train, arrested 2. Authorities confirming they're both British nationals. As said, one of them already released. 9 people were left with life-threatening injuries, 2 of whom still fighting for their lives in a hospital. Violence for the sake of violence, even more alarming at times than ideologically driven one, right? Well, Jimi Hendrix sang "The Wind Whispers Mary," but now it screams, and it screams Melissa, leaving a trail of destruction in Jamaica.
When I get over emotion, I just cry. Just try to cry, but I try to hide it from them. I try to be strong with them, but deep inside, I'm crying. I'm really, really crying.
The scale of devastation left by the powerful hurricane is becoming clear after the record-setting storm tore through not just Jamaica, but Haiti, Cuba, dozens dead. The strongest storm to strike the Caribbean island in modern history. Even more powerful than Hurricane Katrina, which racked New Orleans 2 decades ago. Although downgraded from Category 5 to Category 2 storm, Melissa gathered speed as it swept through the Bahamas and is expected also to make landfall in Bermuda later. So we're following the wind, as if we have a choice, right? Now to the forgotten war, Ukraine. Fierce fighting continues in the eastern part of the country, a battle that could be defining to the future of the war. Ukrainian officials confirmed elite units, as in commando, were flown in earlier this week to help stabilize the front lines in the strategically vital city of Pokrovsk, a key road and rail hub in the Donetsk region. The loss of Pokrovsk would mark a significant breakthrough for Moscow, potentially opening a route deeper into Ukrainian territory. Both sides are locked in some of the fiercest combat since the start of the summer offensive. And yes, while the war on the ground continues, the war over global attention span long lost. And that means there is a winner. There's always a winner when we lose attention. So long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, goodbye. Prince Andrew is now just Andy.
Bombshell is an overused word, but this was a bombshell. It was seismic. I don't think any of us very seasoned royal correspondents who lived through the Diana years and the turmoil of that decade ever thought it would get to this extent.
Well, the fall of the former Duke of York. Now it seems he will also be losing his naval title. Vice Admiral, the former prince, spent most of his life not just as a royal, but as a war hero, as he had a 22-year career in the Royal Navy, serving as a helicopter pilot during the Falklands War. Now, Big Brother King Charles is determined to draw a big, bold line and put his baby brother's relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein behind in the past. Will that do the job? Another scandal for the royal books, that's for certain. Well, ever wonder if there really is a generational gap? Of course there is. Here's a smoking gun for you, literally. The Maldives began implementing a smoking ban on anyone born after January 2007, becoming the only country with such an age group ban. President Mohamed Muizzu declaring the first ever tobacco-free generation. It is not a single measure here. The Coral Island nation maintains a comprehensive ban on the import, the sale, the distribution, possession of use of electronic cigarettes and vaping products altogether. And selling tobacco products to an underage person carries a penalty of thousands of dollars. Doesn't matter the age here. By the way, the measure also applies to visitors, so take note. When there's a will, there's a way. Here's a proof. And from what can kill you alive to the dead makes you feel like you're living. Mexico celebrating Dia de Muertos. About 1.5 million people gathered in Mexico City to the Grand Parade, Day of the Dead festival. And really can't get enough of these colorful pictures, can you? But by the way, I'm sure not all of you know that while honoring the dead is a long-running tradition, the annual parade dates back not way over yonder, less than a decade ago, taking inspiration from, believe it or not, the 2015 James Bond movie, Spectre. In the opening of this film, the British agent is wearing a skeleton costume, walking with a beautiful woman through the large crowds in the festival before, of course, abandoning her in a hotel room to stalk his targets on the rooftops. Well, good, this was not made tradition, right? Abandoning your mate. Speaking of traditions, she did it again. She won Halloween supermodel Heidi Klum stunned fans by transforming into Medusa. I have the hairdo, right? A look that took only 10 hours to complete. It took me more to get ready for tonight. Just kidding. Super impressive, that's for certain. And she takes her trick-or-treating very seriously. We'll give her that. All right. We have now reached the summit. So joining us tonight, Andrea Stricker, Non-Proliferation and Biodefense Program Deputy Director from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Michael Marroy, former U.S. Deputy Assistant to the Secretary of Defense for the Middle East, and our very own Senior Correspondent, Owen Alterman. Thank you all so very much for joining us to a literal blast from the past. Has the world gone mad about the bomb again? The mad principle in itself. Go mad. Let's take a deeper look.
It's a throwback to one of the most dangerous eras in modern history. U.S. President Donald Trump has announced plans to resume nuclear weapons testing, something the country hasn't done in more than 3 decades. Trump says the move is about ensuring America's military advantage and keeping pace with China and Russia, both of which are modernizing their arsenals. But critics warn it could shatter decades of arms control efforts and reignite a global arms race. Across the world, nuclear rhetoric is growing louder, from North Korea's missile launches to fears that Iran could edge closer to a bomb, while regional powers like India and Pakistan continue to expand their programs. Many of the treaties that once kept the nuclear balance in check have collapsed or expired. And this year, the doomsday clock was set at just 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it's ever been, reflecting the world's growing sense of peril. So tonight, we ask the question, are we entering a new nuclear race?
All right, so are we entering a new nuclear race? As always, we begin with a quick fire round, 30 seconds each to lay out your initial stance on the matter, and we pick up the debate from there. Doris Stricker, please take the lead.
Oh, great to be with you. I think more information is needed. So it sounds like the president may be looking to restore something like low-yield nuclear weapons testing, which the U.S. hasn't done since it halted all nuclear testing in 1992. And there's limited information from his post on Truth Social, but he says it will be reciprocal to anything that Russia and China do. So I'm concerned that there will be no guardrails and that things will escalate to large-scale testing, and that China will learn the most information as it seeks to modernize its nuclear arsenal. In short, more information is needed.
Michael Mulroy, the floor is yours. 30 seconds are on.
Well, first of all, good to be with you and my fellow guests. I agree with Andrea. I think it's to be determined, right? It's unclear even if President Trump was referring to the testing of nuclear weapons or testing of the weapon systems that deliver potentially nuclear-powered weapons, like what the NATO countries call the Skyfall missile that Russia just announced so proudly that they were testing. If that's the case, testing the weapon system itself, not that significant. If it is testing nuclear weapons, that could lead to, as you're calling, a nuclear weapons race with a lot of other countries which would like to test their own capacity when the U.S. already has capacity to do so electronically through computers, and I think likely has the most sophisticated and advanced nuclear weapons arsenal. So it's just unclear now with this. I think it was a Truth Social. Oh no, it was actual statement by President Trump, declaration.
Before
right? So that makes it
meeting
more
with Xi, even more interesting. Well, before we kick off the conversation, Owen Alterman, last but not least, your take.
First of all, Ellie, congratulations on coming back with Global Eye, a great moment for our English channel here at I-24 News. Look, taking a little bit of a wider frame, it's going to be tougher this time than it was during the Cold War. We have three major nuclear powers, with China obviously set to really ramp up its program. Beyond that, we have countries like North Korea, and we hope not, but Iran, countries that aren't really under anyone's direct control, but obviously have their own interests and their own ambitions. And also, with the U.S.-China relationship, it's not like the relationship with the Soviet Union. There are a lot of different balls in the air. There are a lot of different issues. And I think there's a real question about where this one stands in an order of priorities. I mean, with the Soviet Union, it was obvious that arms control was the top priority in the relationship, or just about. But with China, there's the intermingling and the interdependence of the economies. There's China's relationship with all kinds of countries, again, including North Korea and Iran, let alone Russia. It's going to be a lot more complicated this time. It doesn't mean there aren't answers, but it's going to be a lot tougher.
So let's engage in a conversation now. Feel free, of course, to interact. And Owen, let's perhaps begin with the point you just made, because our most recent reference point to a time of nuclear race is the Cold War era. But can it really still be a reference point with not a bipolar system, but a multipolar system with many different stakeholders obtaining the bomb and different threshold, different red lines, so to speak?
There are a lot of differences, and we just talked about this, and obviously our guests are expert in the field and can react. But sure, it's different with three parties instead of two, especially when the other two have a relationship that they themselves have described as a partnership, or if not an alliance. So obviously there are a lot of challenges. On the other hand, Ellie, if it were only these three, it's still a relatively small number of players, right, who have arsenals of this size. But obviously, we're also talking about other countries like, again, North Korea, Iran, India, Pakistan. And the Indians and the Pakistanis were there in parts of the Cold War, but the North Koreans, let alone the Iranians, not. So there are other players, and the more players, you look at game theory, the harder it gets to put this in the box, let alone you add in technology, and that's obviously a wild card. Will it make proliferation easier, or will it make it harder? You look in the literature, and again, our other guests can speak to this, I think, even more authority. There are some elements of AI and technology which make monitoring easier. On the other hand, there seem to be elements of AI and technology that make production and advances in nuclear technology easier. So which one wins the race? There are a lot of unanswered questions.
But perhaps to be more specific, Andreas Stricker, we keep on circling back to the MAD principle. Maybe it's not relevant anymore. Maybe compliance through threat is not enough.
Well, I would like to hope that MAD still holds, but with the growing number of players and China's growing arsenal, it does introduce some complexities. And I think this really underscores the fact that there was no consensus in the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty of 1996, which is not fully in force. We just have a voluntary moratorium adhering to the large-scale nuclear testing, and no one doing that. But there was never agreement on what sort of nuclear explosive testing would be allowed. And the U.S. adheres to the zero yield standard, but clearly it thinks that Russia and China are not, and has suspected for a few years that they are not. And so I think what we see is President Trump is going on the side of what energy experts, a small minority in the U.S., think requires new nuclear testing. But every year, the U.S. officials in the Department of Energy have certified that we don't need technical nuclear testing. So there's a lot of moving factors, and it would be good to clarify the situation with what he anticipates doing.
Michael Mulroy, your thoughts?
So I do think the mutually assured destruction theory still holds, as long as you have rational actors, of course. And if you really just look at even a limited exchange of nuclear weapons, say the Pakistan-India type conflict, the global effects are catastrophic, right? It's not just impacts the countries that have the actual exchange. I mean, the environmental consequences are dire. So I think everybody should understand that. But again, that's a rational actor type scenario. On the artificial intelligence, I think, yes, there could be, just like artificial intelligence in general, there's positive, there's negatives. The biggest issue, I think, is whether, when it comes to the use of nuclear weapons, there's always a human factor in all of it. You know, is there mistakes in the determination that would actually have a country respond? Is a human making that decision? Most people would think, well, of course they are. Well, I mean, then go look at the deadhead plan of Russia, which is clearly when they think that there could have been a nuclear weapon attack, there's monitors that go off, there's a missile that goes called the command missile, that in their scenario, they get cut off from the command, the chain of command, and then it just detonates all the missiles to go launch, right? So that's a deadhead plan. That's been around since the Cold War. That takes out the human factor of it. So my concern when it comes to artificial intelligence is that part as well, right? So there's some kind of determination that's outside of human control that you should launch because you're about to be attacked or what have you. Again, this is well beyond the discussion on should we start testing nuclear weapons again? Right. Because in the United States, that would be hundreds of billions of dollars just to get the facilities up and running again, and then 100 million at least per test. And I don't think that's necessary. I'm not a nuclear weapons expert, but I've talked to one because of all this, and they have assured me that would not be in the U.S. interest. Remember, the U.S. has over 5,000. China has around 600, I believe. So they would love to do tests. Their tests are insufficient. So if we started doing it, they're going to start doing it. And I don't think that's in our interest as the United States.
So what, are we going to see a global cascade unleashed? Russia, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, everyone's going to test their nukes nowadays? Where is it going to lead us? Or is it just, I'll frame it as such, Owen Alterman. Is Trump's nuclear swagger a way to escape the Thucydides trap, or the quickest way to trigger it, so to speak?
Ellie, Graham Allison, who wrote about the Thucydides trap, especially about U.S. and China. But just to get our viewers up to speed, what is the Thucydides trap? The Thucydides trap, it's obviously taken from Thucydides, the ancient Greek historian writing about the Peloponnesian Wars. And it's about when there is an existing power and there's a rising power. And there's a collision between the two, and the ambition of the rising power crashes up against the interest in the existing power to keep the status quo. And it usually, according to Graham Allison's really path-breaking study, it usually leads to war, but not always. And for example, did not lead to war between the United States and the Soviet Union, which could potentially be the model. But Graham Allison is very, very worried about the U.S. and China. But Ellie, in 2017, when he came out with the book, an article he wrote for Foreign Policy put out there, that one of the ways actually to keep the peace is for both sides to be willing, counterintuitively, to risk it all, to risk a nuclear war, to risk escalation. Because if one side wants to risk it and the other side doesn't, and is risk averse, well, then one side's simply going to get its way all of the time, and it disrupts the balance of power and itself could lead to war. At any rate, what I think Allison would say, I can't obviously put words into his mouth, but what I take from his words and applying it to what Donald Trump has done is something about the boldness of Donald Trump or even the irresponsibility of Donald Trump actually could be productive here, right? Because it's keeping the Chinese on their toes, showing that the United States is willing to take risks, which actually, again, going back to what he wrote in point 2 of his 5 points about how to keep the peace, actually could be productive in a counterintuitive way.
So as counterintuitive as it may sound, the willingness to light up the fuse is actually a good thing. It's a peaceful thing, Andrea Stricker.
Possibly, but we have to remember that the U.S. sets the standards for the type of nuclear testing that's going on. And so if we're lowering our standards, everyone else will. And that is a very slippery slope that I think we need to be careful about.
So in this respect, if we're looking at the greater scheme of things in the nuclear race, it could potentially trigger, first and foremost, from China's standpoint, Michael Mulroy, is this nuclear parity or nuclear poker, so to speak?
Well, that's why I was saying that I think it's in the U.S. interest, not only to not having nuclear arms race, but we're on the top, right? So why would we want to start the race again? We're in the lead, I think. And I think most people think that as well. We're always going to advance and maintain and modernize our system. I'm sure everybody else is as well. We've already talked about the Russian system that they're working on. But to actually trigger an arms race, and remember, this technology is much more available to others. There's pacts that are being done between countries. Some are nuclear, some are not. Think of the Pakistan, Saudi Arabia pact that's just happened. This could spread. I'm not saying it will, but this could actually spread the access of nuclear weapons to countries that don't have nuclear weapons. There's all sorts of things going on right now that we should be talking about that would limit this instead of talking about expanding it. And again, I don't know if President Trump was using this as some kind of psychological thing or simply talking about, the Russian testing of this Skyfall system. And that's all we're talking about. I don't know why the White House can't clarify that we wouldn't have this debate, but maybe that's their intent. But what I'm saying is we should probably be talking about, I don't know, New START runs out, I think it's in February, treaty. Maybe we should talk about expanding these treaties, including other countries, how we can get away from the nuclear clock that you talked about at the beginning, and less about how we can restart it, right? So that we're all heading toward a place that nobody should want to be headed.
Yeah, so we will be discussing further the ability of diplomacy or lack thereof to curb the nuclear desire. But just to wrap up this part of our conversation, we keep on talking about what happens if we enter a nuclear race. What is a nuclear race going to look like, Andrea Stricker?
Well, I think the key driver of the new nuclear race is really Beijing, and they're moving, as Michael mentioned, from 600 nuclear weapons likely to 1,000 by 2030, maybe to 1,500 by 2035. So while they're not on parity with the U.S. and Russia as far as quantity, because Russia and the U.S. have over 1,000 or over 5,000 nuclear weapons, and we're working on our delivery systems as well. They're trying to catch up in the quality. And so I think the point here is that nuclear testing, if it's done more freely, even at lower yields, China stands to gain the most knowledge because they've done under 50 nuclear tests in their entire history, compared to the US's more than 1,000 and Russia's more than 700.
Owen Alterman, to wrap up this part of the debate.
Look, we're already in an arms race. As we've all said, the Chinese are going from 600 to 1,500. China wants to be a superpower, Ellie, in every single way. And that comes through when you travel to there, as it did with the delegation a number of years ago. And they want to here, too. And in terms of the numbers, it seems to me, again, that there's a point of diminishing marginal returns. What is the practical difference between 1,500 nuclear warheads and 5,000 or 5,500 in the case of Russia? What's the practical difference? There are enough that you can really achieve all of your ends, God forbid, in a conflict. So I don't think we should make too much of that. And the Chinese, if they achieve their goal, will essentially have been at parity, it seems to me, with the United States. And we have to understand what that means and what we can do to try to have some build in some controls. Yeah,
so the main gap is between 0 to 1 and not between 1 to 1,500. We are going to take a very short break now, but when we get back, we will dare to ask the question, are we normalizing the unthinkable? Are we breaking the nuclear taboo a bit too much for our own sake? So Andrea Stricker, Michael Mulroy, Owen Altman, please do stay with us. A very short break. We'll be right back.